Welcome, everybody. I never know when to jump in or when to wait. I was a little late today. Sorry about that. Putting kids to bed is the joy of working at home. Maybe we'll wait a couple more minutes. It looks like a couple more people are showing up, and then we'll talk. But while we're waiting, if people have questions, Randy, I see you're out there. I got your questions. Thank you for sending those in. I'll certainly address those. But if anybody has questions, you can drop them in the chat or the Q&A. That ends up making a much more lively discussion than just me chatting. But I do have a bunch of slides prepared, so it won't be too dry. Might as well kick off. I guess people can always watch the recording. Welcome, everybody. Okay, so tonight's topic is topicals. Happens to be my favorite topic in cannabis. I think it's just going to blow the world away when people realize what capability cannabis has in topicals. A range of things that most people know about, and even more that people have no clue about. And I'll try to highlight most of them. One of the things to, I guess, announce, I'm going to cover some basic recipes tonight. Some of these are already on our website in more pared down form. I'll share those links too. I'm going to talk basically about what you need to make lotions at home, what you can find at a couple of the dispensaries, and sort of the bare bones meat of what's involved. I'm not going to divulge lots of juicy secrets. There is a lot of science behind topicals, and I will do everything short of giving people the sort of secret sauce. But I have put all of the literature up on the archive. So, if you're interested in sort of diving in and being really savvy about what the literature is teaching us, the resources are there. When we talk too much detail about lotions, we get into sort of very treasured business secrets. There are companies out there whose business sort of depends on it. And while I love empowering patients to do their own things, I don't want to take the businesses off too much. All right, I'll get more into that later with one of our guests' questions. All right, see if I can share my screen. Hang on, slideshow, play from the start, share. All right, awesome. So Cannabis Topicals, I think we covered that. Next. All right, so I will do an overview of topicals. Hopefully we'll get some more questions. I saw a couple others coming in already. I'm gonna basically just list the conditions and then talk about some interesting insight I've learned about each of these different conditions. A couple of the things are pretty rare and pretty awesome. For example, I'm working with one patient on boosting hair growth. And that's pretty awesome. And there seems to be a lot of potential, although, we're pioneering this. Really, nobody else, as far as I know, has done meaningful work in that area. I'll cover the basics of how this is done with visuals, and people can interrupt, obviously, with questions. I'll talk about some of the clinical results I've seen. The safety profile is pretty boring. It's all safe. I've never seen an issue related to safety, including people putting cannabis lotions into wounds. One of the things to mention is cannabis is certainly helpful for those wounds, and even people I've talked about, I've talked with them about putting this stuff into their wounds, still no infections or anything. So it seems perfectly safe. A couple of resources here. The academic resources on CED Library are there at that bit.ly link, bit.ly/C, D, lowercase derm. That just brings you to a dermatology folder with tons of papers. I got to most of them before this talk. There are a couple more I'm going to dump in there. So, probably by the time anybody looks this up, that will be full. On the CED site, which is not the Google Drive, we do have a couple pages of useful information for this stuff. One is recipes, where you can watch videos of how to do this stuff, both like sexual lubricant kinds of stuff and regular topical lotions, creams, salves. So recipes for doing that, and then clinic information, which is more like, how would you treat acne? How would you treat psoriasis or eczema? Which is not so much DIY directions, but clinical information and guidance. All right. First, I love learning from patients, and one of the things that I like doing is surveying kind of what people are doing. For me to be reading with my head stuck in the books all day is sort of only useful so far. But here, what you can see is kind of how patients have been using cannabis, what kinds of conditions they've found cannabis helpful for. And one thing that I don't know if I guess you can see my cursor. One thing that's on here is acne and dry skin, and up here headache and muscle pain and migraines, and those, and actually the sexual dysfunction too. Those people are using topicals for. It's such a weird thing for anybody who's not familiar with the cannabis world to imagine that a topical would do anything except moisturize your skin. But I have professional athletes that are using this stuff for the muscle pains related to their workouts and their football practice. It's pretty mind blowing. I also have tons of patients who are using this in the bedroom, either to spice things up or to revive some kind of basic pleasure that might be missing. Headaches and migraines is like low-hanging fruit. Almost everybody who I've seen who has migraines and uses topicals has found relief. Whether it's a reduced frequency or a reduced severity, this is nearly a daily finding. I think this is going to be probably the most loud in the culture, although not necessarily the most bang for your buck. I have probably numbers-wise more patients who are doing cannabis topicals to relax to sleep, sort of like a massage in a bottle. As far as sheer numbers go, that's vastly greater, but I think just people haven't discovered the bedroom stuff or haven't discovered the headache stuff. Acne also, we have a whole adolescence retail community that's just going to fall over themselves for the way that cannabis kills bacteria topically, and for people with rosacea or acne, that's a huge boon. Yeah, another huge part of the population has dry skin. Whether it's weather related or sun related, dry skin is a pretty common problem in all humans. And to have a moisturizer which works better than almost all the other moisturizers out there, just because of the sheer nature of what's involved in this lotion. It's going to move mountains. Exciting stuff. All right. Oh, yeah. One of the other things I sort of alluded there that might be more rich than I let on. Related to sun. So I mentioned weather and sun for moisturizing, but actually cannabis is not only helpful for dry skin related to sun exposure, but also UV protection. The cannabinoid molecules are rings, which actually can not deflect, but can absorb UV light in a way that prevents that from getting in and damaging skin. So picture, I guess, a whole aisle down the supermarket related to skincare and preventing sun damage. It's good stuff. Cost saving. So a lot of people who are using cannabis, are finding that cannabis is helping them save money from other stuff. The bulk of this is probably saving from money because we spend so much on money. But if you think about UV creams, if you think about topical creams, if you think about the amount of expenses people use for varicose veins, we'll talk about that in a little bit. This is a whole new can of worms. I mean, forget hair care, and the people that are losing hair and desperately trying to find anything that can work for them. People would pour money into anything else that might work. All right, how much savings? This is a little bit sort of not only yes, no, I'm saving money, but how much am I saving? And this addresses one of the questions we got ahead of time, which is, what sort of costs are involved in this? For a lot of people, about 20% of people, they think this saves them, up to 10%. Maybe it's helpful, but it's not kind of knocking it out of the park. But then about 15%, 12% think that cannabis has saved them more than what money could buy. And part of that is attributable to the stress relief and curing depression or at least helping it. But anyway, the punchline here is this is a big deal and saving a lot. And I think once the governments and once the sort of money interests catch wind of how much savings there is here, you're going to see cannabis take over everything. It's taking over alcohol industry, taking over the recreation industry. It's really going to be a staple, as it used to be in this country back when cannabis was required to be grown. If you had crops, you had to grow cannabis. How much per month in terms of cost, not just ballparks of this is saving a lot or a little. You can see it right here, about 10% of people, it's very little. And about 20-ish%, it's saving more than, they're spending more than 50 or $100 a month. Are people trying topicals? So about 20% of people try topicals. So 1 out of every 5 people. My numbers are probably higher than what is real in the real world, just because I like to, it's so exciting to share about this stuff. I think I hopefully bite people with the bug of excitement. This is an old actually response. The new response is here, but it's also basically consistent. This is 24%. The last one was about 20. So people are starting to try this. I think the word is starting to get out. One of the interesting things I saw when topicals just sort of dawned on the Boston scene was a lot of really crappy topicals. Some of the major stores were selling stuff that just was terrible. It's basically cream, and it maybe smelled like weed or had a little bit of cannabis in it. But patients would constantly say, this just seems like a waste of money. I did some lab research. I looked up, sort of investigated what was in these products and what kinds of dosages these companies were putting in the lotions, and mostly found that they were overcharging people and underpowering what they were charging for. At that point, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, I decided it made more sense for people to get results from making their own topicals rather than buying the junk that the stores were selling. That trend has changed over time. I've seen dispensaries start to put more attention into their topicals. There are a couple products out there that are as good as what people could make now. And at some point, there's a crossover that maybe it makes more sense to just buy something that's pre-made versus the attention and time it takes to make it at home. But the story's gotten better anyway. That's the punchline. This is a slide of surveying what people find helps them the best. So thinking not just in the topicals world and with people with sort of skin related conditions, but this is sleep stuff, anxiety stuff, The fact that topicals is even on this is shocking to me, or should be shocking to everybody. The idea that people would be consuming cannabis, and when they look to cannabis, they're thinking, "Man, topicals is it for me." That's mind blowing. I think to anybody who understands the reality here, and for it to be close to 15% is pretty insane. That's people, instead of smoking weed or doing vapor pens or even edibles, they're like, topicals is my go-to relief. And a lot of this is headaches. To be honest, in my clinic, I just happen to see that a lot of headaches. There are a bunch of young women who use the topicals for menstrual cramping, and a lot of women over 50 who are using it for perimenopause sorts of pains, hot flashes. A ton of athletes actually too. I wouldn't say it's probably 10 or 15%, but a lot of both professional and amateur athletes using this stuff like pre-workout, post-workout to relax. So yeah, no, it's stunning to me. It's very exciting. This is another survey, same kind of data, basically showing about 14% of my patients are using topicals, and they think that's the best choice for them. So here come the conditions. But actually, before I jump into the conditions, I want to stop the show and answer any questions that are there, just to mix things up. I'll come back to this stuff. All right, stop the share. Back here. Okay, so we have a couple questions up and a bunch more people. Awesome. All right. Thanks for having us. Thanks for coming. Patients. So one of my colleagues has a 13-year-old patient, a client who's presenting with hives that are chronic for 8 months. Would a topical broad spectrum CBD salve help? Yes is the easy answer. CBD in general is a doozy. CBD is out there everywhere. Everybody thinks it's the holy grail. Most retailers are trying to make money. I mean, it's a huge investment to have a business, and they spend a big portion of their pie advertising. They spend a certain portion making their product look pretty. They want it to smell nice. They are not doing that much research and sort of development. I mean, there aren't that many people who know about topicals out there as far as formulating them and how they work and how to apply them sort of with clinical effectiveness. And of course, they're also producing a product which has to apply to a lot of people. So it can't be too strong and it can't be too weak, and they're sort of clueless. I mean, it's really the blind leading the blind. The stuff about CBD versus non-CBD. So for people who are here and may not know, anytime cannabis is minimized, so if there's only one ingredient, it's not going to work as well as when there are more. That seems like a fundamental tenet, I guess, to cannabis that's taken into the body. It's not really the case with topicals. It is to a small degree, meaning if we had a pure jar of CBD, and meaning cannabis flower, which was pure CBD and distilled down, and you got basically liquid stuff, which is CBD. There's a lot to this. If we had pure CBD, which is different than CBD plus THC plus CBG plus CBC, all the other stuff that this flower has, if it's just CBD, that does work topically, but poorly. If we have something in addition to the CBD, such as THC, such as all the other cannabinoids, then it does work better, because your body sees multiple molecules and doesn't ignore them. So the phenomenon that's consistent with inside your body versus topical is your body kind of gets bored of seeing the same molecules over and over. The interesting thing about topicals, which is different than systemic administrations, is it seems like CBD plus other stuff which is in cannabis, not necessarily cannabinoids, will make a big difference. And that is to say, cannabis has these molecules which are unique to cannabis, relatively unique to cannabis. It's not really true anymore. We have mosses that can produce cannabinoids. But so we have cannabis unique stuff, let's just call it that. But there's also other compounds that the cannabis flower produces, things like cinnamon, things like eucalyptus, things like pine smells, things like menthol, things like geraniol, so the smell of roses and geranium, peppermint, linalool is sort of lavender. All of these other things, which are not just unique to cannabis, but cannabis produces, also seem to help topicals work better. This is pretty interesting because coincidentally, these stores who want to sell a CBD product want it to smell nice. So they might throw a little bit of lemon in there because maybe people like lemon. That coincidence happens to make the product they're selling accidentally better. They don't know that, they don't understand that. They're including the CBD or the lavender smell for other reasons, but it happens to make the products work better. And that's why I think that's why you see CBD creams as hit or miss. You know, depending on what they're including in their formulation, it'll work or it won't work. You know, based on the chemistry. So to this question, would broad spectrum CBD help? Probably. I mean, the fact that it's described as broad spectrum means they're including mostly CBD because they can't sell, you know, sort of high percentages of anything else. But there are ways that one can make it work even better at home. And some of that stuff I'm going to go through today. You know, depending on how active, you know, the parents want to be. I think it's really fun to make this stuff. It's not terribly difficult. But, you know, maybe they don't want to be bothered. They have enough on their plate, you know, with this teenager. My bet would be probably, I'd say 15 out of 100, they're going to find it perfectly helpful. And 85 out of 100, they're going to be underwhelmed, or it'll work for maybe a couple weeks. And then if they think it doesn't work. So maybe adding some of the other stuff I'm going to talk about in a minute would be helpful. Hopefully that gets that, and we haven't beat that one to a dead horse. Another question here. Okay, so detailed account for a post-surgical wound, which cannabis helped to heal. Oh, I would love to hear it. I mean, I know these cases a lot, but maybe we can, maybe after I go through the recipe, we can have you talk about it. I would love people to hear more than just my voice. All right. And then another question here is, would we use cannabis topicals for actinic keratosis? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't have a lot of patients who have sort of specifically tried for it. I think it probably would work, partly because of the theory underneath topicals, and that's, you know, perfect to talk about here. One of the things that cannabis molecules, one of the things that they do is reactivate the cells. It's almost like one of those big Staples red reset buttons, but for the communication, for the sort of cycle of a cell. All the cells in our bodies have machinery that are constantly running. You know, if one cell, just as an example, has cancer sort of starts in a cell. That cell does two relevant things. One, it shuts off the self-destruct button for that cell. So that cell is going to keep living, even though the body normally would have it destroy itself because it's clearly malfunctioning. The other is that it's replicating over and over and over. So it stops killing itself and it replicates basically forever. When cannabis is present, it sneaks into the communication system of that cell. So it's floating around in the bloodstream, hits that cell, and can bind to the outside of the cell and transmit a signal through the inside, through the membrane, into the middle of the cell. That happens to do a nice thing, which is to turn on the self-destruct mode, and that cell can then die. And that's sort of where we see cannabis killing cancers coming from. It's really that communication penetration. But it also does a little bit of action at the core function of a cell, which is genetic replication. It's sort of reading a gene and activating different parts of interpreting what's on our DNA. And that system helps heal, helps reset things that might be off. So if a cell is malfunctioning, like actinic keratosis, like a melanoma, like a dry skin, like a psoriasis, like a, well, I'll leave it at that. I was going to say infected skin, like acne and acne and rosacea, but it's actually a different mechanism. But for the stuff which is dry skin, sort of normal cells kind of gone wrong, the cannabinoid signaling hack, the communication that's sort of reactivating these cells, is almost like we would think of a sort of stem cell rejuvenating this cell or this system. That's sort of the way it works in plain English. The other way that cannabinoid topicals works is sort of, as I was alluding to, antibacterial. That the molecules, the cannabis molecules, kill bacteria. Simple, fair and simple. They also happen to kill viruses and funguses, fungi, but through different mechanisms. Okay. Oh, I want to talk about this too. It's a favorite topic of mine. So Kim has mentioned that she finds that cannabis products for intimacy are extremely important to educate people on. I wholeheartedly agree. You know, there are cheap imitation cannabis intimacy products. They are everywhere. Agreed. People love to shortchange consumers, causing things like rashes and urinary tract infections, certainly sexual discomfort. So it is really important for people to understand what they're doing when it comes to the genitalia. That's true to some degree equally among men and women, but also, you know, women with more exposed mucosal membranes, you know, tend to have higher doses penetrating. And that's also relevant, you know, especially as spa products come on. Those are really popular now, bath bombs and sort of soaks. It's important for women to be mindful. But both are equally affected and can, you know, derive comfort and pleasure both. Okay. Let me jump back to the DIY stuff, and then I'll come back to a couple other questions that have popped up here. Share PowerPoint. Okay. Alrighty, so conditions, some of these I've already covered, just to remind people in a random order that I picked out of my head a couple minutes ago. So there are, I think, general stuff that applies to a lot of people and it's super common. And then there are things which are a little bit more rare. And maybe these will stimulate questions, so it's worth reading off the list. And we also have a caller who's listening on the phone, so I want to be mindful of them too. And these are in no particular order, just whatever happened to come to mind. Relaxation, you know, as I was alluding to, people using cannabis as a massage to help them relax, help arm muscles or leg muscles or face muscles relax at the end of a day is a super common use. Almost everybody who does that feels like it's working well for them. Skin healing, you know, minor cuts, cannabis is pretty awesome. You know, so think about shaving cuts, think about just nicks and bruises with kids. I think there will be a day when we're more comfortable doing that. Local bruising and local pains, I'm thinking more athletic stuff or small, you know, injuries, you know, on the field, off the field. Varicose veins is certainly not general. That should have been in the more rare category, but I do have patients who are using cannabinoids for reducing varicosities. This is tremendous. There are really lousy and very few options for folks to deal with incompetent veins. You know, for probably the bulk of these, it's women, you know, postpartum, meaning they've had children and the extra blood from carrying a child has caused some of their veins to overload and become incompetent. You know, the big reset button action is happening, you know, functionally here, and we're seeing some reduction. That's mind-blowing and awesome, but relatively unheard of for most people. Dry skin, super common, but, you know, nothing that exceptional. I think, you know, most pharmacies and stores these days have good emollients, have good lotions and creams, but, you know, I think cannabinoid creams are that much better. Headache, as I said before, is a pretty awesome relief. We're talking migraine, like clinical migraines. I've also seen ocular migraines, a different kind of migraine, get better with cannabinoids. And just as a quick aside, the way this works, when a migraine is basically a spasm of small vessels, either in the brain or wherever the migraine might be. And cannabinoids happen to have smooth muscle relaxing properties, which helps them for working for muscle pains. If you have muscles that can relax because of the cannabinoids, those muscles can be very fine and small inside the arteries of your brain. And if we can help those things relax, they're not going to be spasming as painfully. You can see where relief happens with migraines. Tension, sort of same story, except bigger muscles. The muscles of people's necks are sometimes crooked if they're on the phone or at work, I guess, old phones, where their necks are strained because of computer watching or whatever. And then, of course, stress causes headaches. We keep a lot of tension in our bodies related to stress. And if you have an option like a topical to get rid of that, it's pretty awesome. Acne and rosacea, I alluded to before, it's just sort of antibacterial action from cannabinoids. Topical fungal infections. I have patients who use cannabinoids either under armpits or in groin or under breasts, in between toes, anything where fungus grows, and fungus is a natural part of, being alive on Earth. The plants developed sort of these molecules naturally, and probably to help fight fungus in the wild. But as we extract them, they also help fungus on us. Muscle pains, I already talked about. Joint pains, same kind of idea. This is a little bit more poorly understood by me. It does work. I mean, it's really a slam dunk for a lot of people with arthritis. But there isn't much blood flow actually between a joint. So I think the mechanism of action, the way this works in joints, is very different from how it works with muscle pains. One of the other things that cannabis does is interrupt nerve signaling. We think of nerve signaling as just A to B to C. Your brain tells your spinal cord to do something, which tells your arm to do something. And there is also communication, which is back, D to C to B to A. And that's an endocannabinoid mitigated function. And if we throw some other cannabinoids in, that's basically being interrupted or thrown off base. And that might be what's going on here with arthritis. Nobody really knows. We're in pioneering territory here. Menstrual cramping, I guess, is probably in the general category as far as rare goes, but only because people haven't heard of it as much. It's really effective for young women menstruating, both like sort of on the abdomen or on thighs. I'm not really advising young women to be using this from a suppository perspective, although there are women who have endometriosis, which is a severe condition of menstrual pain, and suppositories are incredibly effective there. All right, and then the other category here, less common stuff, and I'm not sure if this is just cultural awareness because it's so new, or what, but hot flashes, I mentioned before, it's really effective for women in a way that almost nothing else is. This might be part of the nerve sort of signaling that I was just alluding to. But again, nobody knows. Hand tumors, actually have a couple patients who have small, what are called neuronal sheath, nerve sheath tumors. We can have tumors basically anywhere in the body. As soon as a cell starts growing more than it should, we call it a tumor. I've seen a couple patients with hand tumors, and they literally shrink just putting the lotion on them. It's quite remarkable, plain and simple. Insect repellent, I don't know that many people know this, apart maybe from me. I don't really talk about it that much, but in the wild, cannabinoids are insect repellents, and I think this will be a future pathway for topical cannabis. UV protectant, I alluded to before. Skin burns, same kind of thing. Partly the reset button, partly the moisturizing, partly the anti kind of dirt and antibacterial function. It's pretty effective for burns. Restless leg syndrome. For whatever reason, this is on the list because it's super common for people to have. I didn't quite realize it in my primary care practice. I didn't realize it was this common, but a lot of people dealing with restless leg syndrome, and cannabis topicals rubbed on the legs works. I mean, plain and simple. This is probably the nerve feedback mitigation or sort of interruption. Psoriasis, it's an autoimmune skin. You get dry skin because you get dry and attacked skin because your immune system is sort of fighting its own in a unhealthy way. But cannabis seems to calm it down, and it could be any number of mechanisms. Most of the stuff we've talked about. Neuropathy, nerve pain, I probably have talked about that enough. Regional pain, same kind of thing. And then hair growth, I have a couple patients that are working on trying to grow lost hair. Not grow new hair where there wasn't some, but sort of hit the reset button on regrowing hair. Okay, as far as data goes, I got some feedback from past webinars that I went a little bit too dry in the data, so I'm going to skip that mostly entirely. For people that want to look up the data, the CED library has tons of it. There are more papers about cannabis and dermatology in the animal literature than there are in the human literature, but it's, we're all animals and there's enough to learn from basic science and from how these things are working and safe. And the reason I put it in this library is so that people can search it and just use the Google search bar. So I'm going to dive now into how to make this stuff. And then I'll come back and answer more questions. And keep in mind, this is just one way of doing things. I read a ton and I play with the chemistry, and I try it with patients occasionally, sort of what they're doing. And this is just what I've come up with. There are people who are far more experienced in the sort of cosmetics world that might have other input. I think the focus here really should be not on, is this the best possible kind of formulation, but this is one that works pretty powerfully. And I'm really focused on the cannabis part of it. So this is a little bit of a window into how a home cannabis lotion producing factory might look. On the top, you can see terpenes, which I buy. I'm not especially fan of true terpenes. They're just one of the organic options online. There are many. Cetaphil, I'm a huge fan of. They come in kind of different densities. There's really thin creams. There's really thick creams. And then down in the bottom right are coconut oil. That's another way to make cannabis lotions, depending on how thin you want it to be. A lot of the bedroom stuff, coconut oil works better than creams, which can be very irritating to women. I don't know why this is here. So these are terpene bottles. A note for people who are using terpenes. Terpenes is sort of like stage 2 advanced home topical manufacturing. There are lots of different types of terpenes that you can use. There's very thin amount of data supporting certain terpenes over certain other terpenes, but this is something where we get into the kind of secret sauce for businesses. So I don't really want to teach too much about that. But the evidence is there. If you read it, you can kind of piece it together yourself. I just don't want to make people angry. Okay, so if you have a pot of boiling water and an empty salsa container and a lotion at home, that's your basic for cannabis lotions. It's really not that hard. You can basically fill your salsa container after you've cleaned it out, mostly full with lotion in the end. But we're not going to do that as a first step. Actually, what you see here is a later step. I didn't have other pictures, but I do in the next slide, actually. So first step, what we're going to do is put cannabis concentrates into this cleaned out salsa jar. The concentrate, depending on what you can buy wax, you can buy distillate, you can buy shatter. There are 100 other names of things you could buy. You're basically getting concentrated cannabis in some form that's inexpensive, so you're not breaking the bank. For people who are in the medical system in Massachusetts, there are 15 dispensaries now that offer some kind of 50% off deal for either a new patient or renewing patients. That's a pretty awesome time to get 50% off the cost of making your topicals. As far as prices go, Dispensaries sell topicals anywhere from 30 to 40 bucks for like a small jar, to up to 100. You know, I mean, you really can find a wide range. But if you can cut that in half, you know, buying from a dispensary becomes an option. Or, you know, if you're cutting your costs for making it in a DIY way, you can save a lot of money. I imagine there are going to be more questions about that, but I'll leave that to people as individual questions. Okay, so this is one type of distillate or concentrate here. You can see different color here. It's a little bit darker. It's just a different concentrate that I used. But after you put the concentrate in, you could put, at this stage, a little bit of coconut oil. That will make the whole thing a little bit more liquidy and manageable. You could put some, yeah, I think most of my recipes start with a little bit of coconut oil. You don't have to do that, actually. You know, most lotions out there are actually a blend of soapy stuff, so liquid stuff, watery stuff, and oily stuff, and they're pieced together with waxy stuff, which is an emollient. So all lotion that we have is basically some component of water, some component of oil, and something that mixes the two. If you put lotion into this concoction I was showing before, that will turn into a liquidy goop. Let's say it looks like this. You don't have to start that way. You could start with a pre-made lotion, or you could start with the pure cannabis concentrates mixed with a little bit of coconut oil. As you heat them up and in boiling water, which is about 212 degrees Fahrenheit, that's close enough to the boiling points for the lotions and the cannabinoids to melt consistently and to activate the acid cannabinoids just enough. Just know that it's the right temperature. You can geek it out if you want to know the exact temperatures, but basically a bath of boiling water is close enough. When you're taking a lotion to begin with, it might be too liquidy. If you want it to be more thick, you know, if you think back to the components of lotion, it's oily stuff, it's watery stuff, and it's waxy stuff. You can actually buy pieces of wax online for a song and a dance. These sort of little pellets of wax. And if you drop a couple pellets in to boiling water, boiling wax, boiling lotion, it's going to melt and sort of thicken things up a little bit. So you can find your ideal thickness, or you can just start with a lotion like, you know, Cetaphil has these products that are just cream. It's hard to see, sort of just creamy, and it's a pretty thick cream. Or they also have these other products that are much more liquidy. You know, depending on what you want out of your lotion, you pick the lotion you want, melt it down. When you reheat it, when you recool it at the end, it will come back to the original lotion you had, the original thickness. Here I use a mini spatula to mix things up, just because it's easier to get every last little bit at the end. I suppose you could use anything else to stir it, but you don't really need that much for ingredients. As long as you have your salsa container, you have your wax, your lotion, and your cannabis concentrate, that's, you know, basic 101. For less basic, so let me fill in the what happens there. So boiling water, you put the cannabis concentrate in, let's say with coconut oil. It boils, it turns into a brown goo. You take that off the stove, off the boiling water, put in some lotion and fill it up to the thickness that you think, you know, you would want. And I have these measurements on if someone wants to be more measured about it, but I tend to eyeball all my cooking, including my lotion making. And then you really shake the dickens out of it. You're physically mixing the cannabinoid parts with the lotion parts. Sometimes I'll put this back, the cannabis lotion and the concentrates back into the boiling water and let it all boil together. There are lots of ways to doing it. I haven't found rhyme or reason one way to prefer it. Once that's done, you know, you have to be, you know, oven mitts, because this is really hot stuff, and you keep shaking it till it looks all homogeneous, all looks the same. Once it's cooled down, if you feel like being fancy, if you feel like you know, doing your research and understanding terpenes might help, this is a time where you can add terpenes. And terpenes are incredibly powerful. What's sold online is really, really concentrated, so much that it might hurt you if you put it on your hand. So you have to be cautious with what you use. You don't need that much. If you think about it as for smell, even though it's not, that's probably a good indication. This stuff can be overpowering physically and overpowering for your nose. Okay, so this is an example of I just started mixing and it was a little bit too thick, so I added some thinner lotion on top, and just keep stirring and mixing until you get the thickness that appeals to you. And here are 3 different varieties of thickness. The really green one on the right here was a super thick variety. The one in the middle was much more of a thin variety, and the one on the end was much more thick. Different conditions, different sort of interests might persuade you to be more or less thick. I find that the thicker it is, the kind of longer it stays on your skin, and that might not be a good thing if you're putting it under a shirt because of back pain, but it might be a great thing if you're protecting your hands from the sun or kind of guarding wounds. You want it to not evaporate too quickly. Okay, why don't I stop there and ask and take questions? And it looks like there are a couple here. All right. So one comment, vaginal suppositories, CBD suppositories are life-changing. This I've heard over and over. It is true. Make sure women are not going to Amazing and shoving an overly priced, dangerous knockoff CBD suppository into their vagina, for sure. I mean, I think, hopefully most women would understand that, stuff sold at a gas station, sold at a sex toy shop, they're looking for profits. I mean, they probably don't have that many customers, and they are not so caring about their customers as far as repeat customers. So yeah, of course, be careful with what you're putting in. But does work wonders for pelvic pain, for menstrual cramping, for any kind of groin pain. All right, another question. Are DIY lotions so much better than other products available commercially, but worth the expense? I think so. I think because if you screw up, you can always make, like, if you don't make a lotion powerful enough, you can always add extra stuff. I have a bunch of patients who've tried a recipe and it's just not working as well as they want to. Well, all you have to do is put that into boiling water, add extra keef, add extra wax, add extra shatter. You're sort of hyper boosting it, shake the dickens out of it, and you have a sort of level up. You can't do that with a product you buy at the dispensary. You have to sort of count on them being good. There are a couple products out there that I've heard good reports about. And my observation is that basically anytime there's more than 400 or 500 milligrams in a container, that it's probably going to be effective. Netta in Brookline has a product that meets that bill. There's a product in Cambridge at Rev Clinics that meets that goal, and I've heard positive feedback about those products. But I also know of a product at Netta where people think it doesn't work. So it's really hit or miss from dispensaries. I'm not constantly testing what's out there, so my knowledge is limited. But I have seen overall a trend of increasing attention, increasing potency, but it's not across the board. Some stores, especially the new ones, have no idea. As I said, they have no idea what they're doing. Almost every time, this is the second part of your question. Almost every time I've seen people use steroid creams, cannabis is miles better, like blowing it out of the water. For eczema, for pains, for sort of skin treatment, the cannabinoids are so much stronger as an anti-inflammatory than the steroids are. And one of the other options available when you're making your own is you can learn about what other things people might put into topicals, for example, arnica or mint. And you can sort of put that in yourself. I mean, this stuff is pretty easy to make. It's not terribly costly as far as the lotions and the arnica, the kind of additives are. but you might be able to put something together that that works for you uniquely. Okay. Another question, when making your own salve, are there any ingredients you should be mindful of avoiding for diabetics? That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I've never heard of, I'm trying to think if I've heard of diabetics reacting to something topically. I mean, that sort of raises a relevant question, which is how much of this stuff is getting into your system and interacting with your brain? Are you going to get high from topicals? And no is the easy answer there. It's very rare that people get high from cannabinoids topical. I have seen a couple patients who consume boatloads systemically, meaning edibles, or they're smoking or breathing it a lot, and then adding a ton of topical cannabinoid might have an effect, but just because you're kind of riding that high level all the time. But the vast majority of people, I would say over 90%, over 95% of people don't get high. So is someone with diabetes going to react even if it was like honey based? Maybe, but probably not. I mean, our skin is pretty thick for preventing things that don't belong getting in. My hunch is it wouldn't, but there are probably cases where people with severe diabetes or poorly controlled diabetes do have an impact. But it's not something I would really worry about. I probably wouldn't even kind of bark up that tree unless I needed to. What else do I have here? I have a whole array of topicals to display, but we've kind of hit it all through pictures. And it looks like we're winding down. Time flies. Any other questions while we have a couple minutes left? Should just one terpene added to a DIY lotion, or would a combination of terpenes be better? And if so, what combination? So this was the sort of secret sauce that we're creeping up to that edge, and I don't begrudge you for asking. It's a good question. I think multiple will probably be better as far as terpenes go. The literature, as you can read about terpenes, is some of the terpenes are studied and show that stuff on the skin gets in deeper, and separately, some of the stuff that we put on the skin gets in faster. So when we think about what are terpenes doing, cannabinoids can get in without terpenes, and most of the time they can work adequately. When there are some terpenes, you're going to get deeper penetration. So someone with like deep muscle pain would find cannabis lotion plus certain terpenes better. But then other terpenes might have better antibacterial function. So if someone's using it for acne or rosacea or skin burn, they might value that attribute, the power to kill bacteria, more than they would value the depth penetration. So sort of different terpenes apply to different scenarios. I'm sure I like the retail groups wish there was a one size fits all, and kind of one solution would work for everybody, but it's really not the case, which is another vote for DIY as opposed to buying dispensary products. You don't know what they're putting in it. They probably want it to smell nice, and that's kind of their focus. And that might not be your interest if you have radiation burns from breast cancer or something. All right. Has anyone in Massachusetts been able to get a CBD product reimbursed by FSA? Yes. Yeah. So CBD products are sold online, and there's a lot of the trust system with the FSA kind of claims. So FSA something savings account, but it's basically a pre-tax way, that people who are working can allocate money spent on medical things and save some money. There are some companies that use that as a post hoc thing, like they ask you to submit a receipt, and the company decides whether they're going to pay you back or not. And some companies just issue you a credit card for whatever portion of your paycheck you put in there. I've seen FSA and HSA cards cover cannabis related stuff, and including visits, certainly, but also products, CBD products, and cannabinoid adjacent products, things like medical bag, or a smell-free bag. They don't really know what that stuff is for, and they don't. It's not a. They're not going to make their customers. The insurance company is not going to make their customers angry to fight over every last thing. So I think some people kind of put cannabis into this gray zone, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. I think it's probably an insurance policy somewhere, and individuals will all be different. But I've seen it covered, our visits certainly, but we're not touching product with patients. So it's a little bit different. I have actually a couple links. I'll put into the chat here. I can show them on the preview. Hang on. Just useful links again for what people might find helpful. Where is? I've lost my presentation. Oh, here we go. Okay. So these, if people don't have these, I can't imagine how you got to this talk in the first place, but these are our community sort of outreach. We have a Twitter feed where, I'm posting stuff about topicals and every other thing, and same with Facebook and Instagram. CED Clinic, our website, is really where most of the action is for detailed stuff. cedclinic.com/CED library is where you have access to the library. This particular folder, this bit.ly/CED derm, is where I've put all the dermatology specific stuff in. And then through this link, the cedclinic.com/skin, you'll see, one set of information which is different than the recipes and guidance. That's cedclinic.com/topical. I encourage people to check it out. We put a lot of effort into those, and we provide them for free because we're trying to do the right thing. And there are a bunch more recipes going up soon. I actually just started the process to upload a whole bunch of awesome recipes for topicals and derm related stuff. So keep a lookout for that. I think we have some bath bomb recipes on there too. So not to put dispensaries out of business, but just to give people more options at home, because that is ultimately the power of cannabis. Any other questions before we call it a night? Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you everybody for showing up. Hopefully this was entertaining, or at least educational. I appreciate everybody coming, and look forward to seeing you all with the next one. All right. Take care.